put your hands together for the late morning program with your host, Namarasa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the late morning program, episode 5 with Jahnavi Harrison. Jahnavi, nice to have you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming on.
I'm so excited. I've never been on a podcast before.
Really? No, you have. You do radio shows and stuff,
Those
right?
aren't podcasts, though.
Yeah.
Like
Tell us about that. You do something for British radio or something, right?
Yeah, I do programs for the BBC.
I actually can't drink this. It's too hot.
I do. Well, when I was in England, since we're obviously in New York now.
Yeah.
I was doing a short, 3-minute. Sorry. Excuse me. Someone in the audience is making noise. Hi. I was doing short 3-minute broadcasts called Pause for Thought on Radio 2, which is it's a breakfast show. It's the most listened to station in the UK because it's all popular music from not the most current music, but you know, so it has a really large audience. And then I do these long programs called Something Understood on Radio 4, which is more of a social commentary, news, drama, it's like a talk radio station.
Nice.
So yeah.
So so you do that in England. So you grew up in England.
Yes.
Nice. Tell us a bit about that. Where did you grow up? I mean, some of our viewers remember what Tulsi said, but you probably have a different take on your, how you grew up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Different angle.
Yeah. So, well, does everyone know I'm your sister-in-law? I don't know if they do.
Yeah, I think most people know.
So I grew up at Bhaktivedanta Manor. Well, usually when I say that, people assume that it was we were living on the property itself.
Right.
But most of the people that were part of the community lived nearby in surrounding villages and things. It's a very kind of rural area because it's protected farmland, greenbelt. So I grew up there. I went to school there at Bhaktivedanta Manor. If anyone doesn't know, it's a spiritual community, Hare Krishna community, about 15 miles, I think, north of London. Mm-hmm. And
George Harrison had something to do with that,
George Harrison
right?
donated the property, in the 1970s.
Nice.
And so I went to school there, and that was really, I think, it's always seems sad if you say the best days of my life and they were in childhood, and now you're and now my life is rubbish. but they're the best days of my life in many ways. It was a really wonderful time.
Yeah.
Very diverse community at the time, people from all over the world. I was just thinking about that the other day, how, even though I wasn't growing up in an urban environment, I had that experience of very multicultural environment, people, so many different languages being spoken. And also connection with nature, because we were surrounded by nature. There was a lake, there was a forest, and there was a farm, and then we had lots of cows. So after school, we would often go down and be with the cows and play in the hay barn and stuff. So we kind of had that little country type of
I guess that's a stark difference to what you do now. I mean, you're kind of based in New York City now.
Yeah, right now I'm based at the Bhakti Center, which is it's a 6-story spiritual cultural center in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And needless to say, being in the heart of the city is kind of an adjustment.
That square, that street on First Avenue and First Street, that block is the busiest block in Manhattan. I've heard.
Really?
When a few years ago, someone told me that there was
there.
I did. There was a study that was done of all the, streets or whatever in Manhattan, and that one is the most busy. It's never a time where it's quiet. Maybe on a Sunday morning at 5 a.m. I kind of remember it being really quiet, but that's the busiest street because there's so many bars, there's so many clubs, there's so many restaurants, and they're open all night and stuff. That must really tough for you sometimes, right? Because growing up in you know, rural England and then coming to the busiest street in Manhattan and living there.
Yeah.
So like, what is it like for you for the, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. Everyone keeps asking me, so how is it being in the city? And I'm like, it's okay. No, it's actually, I mean, I couldn't be there if I wasn't staying in a place like the Bhakti Center, which, you know, aside from it being it's a building which, I don't know how many years it's been now, maybe 30 or 40, that it's been owned by Hare Krishna is trying to practice Bhakti Yoga. So, you know, for that reason, although it's gone through so many evolutions, the walls are kind of saturated with chanting of mantra and, you know, all these, it sounds like a hippie kind of thing to say, but positive vibrations. It is positive
I think, no, I agree with that.
It's a shelter. It's like going into a little oasis. But there are things which are difficult about it. I mean, you know, it took me a while to get used to all the sounds at night of, you know, outside the window, people yelling at each other, and glass breaking. And not only that, what I find the most noticeable are the sirens, because there's a hospital down First Avenue, a little while down there. And there's all different ambulances throughout the day going, but they all have different types of sirens. Right. So I've started like classifying them in my mind, like different types of.
You're like, a musician, aren't you?
There's like a banshee, and there's like video game shootout. It's like.
Oh yeah, I know that one. Oh my god, that's really funny.
And there's one that's like. And so I found at least like 7 different types so far.
Whoa. That's
anyway,
cool.
So
yeah,
there's a lot of noise. Yeah.
Right. And so what do you do there at the center? Like, what are your responsibilities, or what is your kind of like, what do you do?
Well, right now, I mean, I'm still a little new there in one sense. I've just been there since April, but I had some time back in England. So, so certain aspects of my role and my service there are still kind of evolving. But primarily I'm involved with sound, with music, with the traditional music of Bhakti, which is Kirtan. So I help to, I'm engaged with Kirtan programs. There's different Kirtans that happen during the week. We're starting some new ones in a couple of weeks' time. Also teaching meditation class, sound meditation. So right now there's a huge boom in interest in things like sound baths and sound healing. A lot of people are into yoga or meditation. A lot of people know about them, but think, oh, that's not for me. Right. But people, you know, everyone knows how to sit back and close their eyes and listen to something. Yeah. And so sound experiences, particularly for, you know, relieving stress and re-energizing. It's like, at least in New York City, definitely in London, it's a huge deal. So we're trying to start some classes like that. Wow. But yeah, I'm doing lots of different things. It's kind of diverse right now.
You always have been into like music, and you have a background in writing, and you've always been into music and creative things like that, right? So did you ever feel, you know, I know we were speaking earlier about how, you know, kind of the balance between doing what you like and kind of doing to maintain yourself. So maybe talk a little bit about that. Like you kind of really go to the direction of doing what you like and what you appreciate and what brings you happiness. So what could you say to people who, or young people even, that like they don't know? Like yesterday we had a career fair at our local temple, which was really cool. It's like kind of groundbreaking. We never ever did that. And they were talking about, you know, try to do things that, you know, that you like, and that can maintain you as well, but kind of more what you like, because you know, happiness is more important than you know, just trying to get the job that makes the most money, you know. So
well, I can say I definitely never chased money, which is to my detriment sometimes.
Really, you think so?
Nah. I don't know. Well, really? I don't know. I mean, definitely I haven't, you know, I haven't been on the same path as a lot of people I know, which by now, like,
that's what makes you unique, I think, right?
now I'm, you know, in my early 30s, and a lot of my friends are now, you know, owning property or, you know, at least whatever, all the kind of things that we consider kind of making it, you know, at least to a certain level, making it. But I can say, I think, you know, part of it is growing up in a community as I did. When we were little kids, we were already studying Bhagavad Gita, the sacred text, which is heavily, you know, giving this message of detachment from material goals. And of course you could say, oh, okay, you take that in as a child and then maybe you reject it as an adult because it's like, well, all right, they say that, but
right. The reality is
I need to,
you know, take care of your family. You need to get food on the table.
And that doesn't mean that you are a materialistic person. That's just practicality,
right,
you know, of living in the world. So I consider myself extremely fortunate that somehow I ended up having the opportunity to do what I love, because I recognize that it's really not the case for everyone. Definitely majority of people get driven by circumstance more than choice, for one reason or another. And I mean, for me, I was always creative and artistic, but I never had much confidence that that was like a career path for me for some reason. Maybe because I was never one of those kids who really worked hard at something. Like, I was very diverse. I played the violin. I was into writing, into drawing, all kinds of creative pursuits. We Tulsi and I, my sister, we did dance, pursued dance very heavily during a certain time. But none of them were like a thing to the degree where, because I did so many things, you know, many teachers used to say, like, you know, you need to give up some things because you're just like a jack of all trades. Like, I remember my dance teacher called me to her office one time and she was like, you know, you're really good. I want you to join my professional company, but you have to give up music and all these other things, because how are you going to actually excel at something if you don't focus your energy? And she was right, I think, in a way. And it really made a big impact on me, and I felt kind of terrible actually about myself. I felt like, why am I interested in so many different things? Why can't I just narrow it down? So by the time I went to university, I was kind of thinking, well, yeah, probably I shouldn't do music. Probably I shouldn't do art, which were two things that I really loved. And I loved writing, and everyone was kind of like, yeah, you know, that would be something that you can do something with later. So I was like, right.
Wow.
I'm like, yeah, okay, I can do something. What that something is, I'm not sure. So I started my degree, and like a year in, I was like, well, it's interesting, but I really don't know what I want to, I don't know where this is leading. And I wanted to give up, but I'd had this, you know, in my youth, I had this impression of myself that I gave up on things very easily. Right. And at that age, I was like, no, I want to prove it to myself that I can finish something nicely. So I pushed through and I finished it, and I got really good marks. But in my final months, I was like, I have no idea what I want to do after this. And I was just basically thinking, I'll probably do temping. Do you call it that here? Temping? Like, basically temporary work in the office, you know, like a receptionist or whatever, photocopying stuff for people.
Right.
I thought at least I can earn some money and, you know, figure things out. And it was that time, the 3 years that I was in university, during the summers, I had started coming to the States and doing these bus tours, the ISKCON youth bus tours.
We get on a bus and with a bunch of other kids and travel
all over the States and Canada, and we were presenting spiritual culture in, you know, a very charming way. We were doing dramas and, you know, serving at various temples that we would visit, and for me it was profoundly transformational experience. I gained so much confidence. I started to really be confident with playing my violin in the Kirtan, which is something that I really hadn't done before. Meeting other people my age who had grown up in the same way as I had, and also just getting a taste for that specifically, like presenting spiritual culture. I mean, we would do it wherever we were, whether it was like, Thunder Bay, Canada, or what you might consider to be a little bit middle of nowhere,
right?
Or Los Angeles on the beach, on Venice Beach. And so I remember by the second time I went on it, at the last performance of the tour, I just, like, after the performance, we were at the temple and I went in front of the altar, and I remember just like sobbing with gratitude that I felt like I've had the opportunity all summer long to do something that I really love. I've been able to be artistic and creative and in just such a wonderful way, And so I guess the seed was planted to want to do stuff like that. So when in my final year at university, I got a phone call from Gauravani, who some people know, very famous Kirtan leader and multi-dimensional artist himself.
Right.
He said, yeah, we're going to do this thing called a mantrology tour all over the States, and we need musicians.
Right.
And it was like a month before I was about to graduate. I was like, okay.
So you were going to do it after you graduated and go on this tour?
Yeah, but I missed my graduation. I just didn't care about it at all. I
didn't go to mine either.
So many people don't. Yeah, so I went on that tour, and basically that was the beginning. Actually, this month is basically 10 years to the month that I kind of started out on that journey with doing this. And so it's been quite a long time, and I honestly never imagined that I'd still be doing these kind of things. I kind of just thought, yeah, it'll be fun. I'll do it for a little while.
That's really interesting that you didn't picture yourself doing it for that long.
I didn't, and I actually, I did some of the tours, and then I would go back to England, and I still had in my mind that, okay, I'm gonna get like a normal job.
Really?
And I actually got a job as the editor of an arts magazine, and before I commenced the job, because I'd been doing freelance work as a writer and kind of journalist on the side, which I still do. So before I got the job, I came over here to do some other kirtan engagements and things. And then when I was here, I was due to go back, and I just had this like strong gut feeling that I'm meant to be here for some reason, and I think I'm meant to stay here. So for the first time in my life, I did something like bad, which was miss my flight on purpose.
Ooh.
I'd never done, I'm like very much like, I like to do things right and follow the rules. I'd never done anything like that. I was just like, okay, I'm not going to go. And I had no idea about, a plan of anything, but I just kind of thought I'm meant to stay here. So that was kind of, for me, it was an intentional moving away from something that would have been much more dependable. It was a full-time job, and it would have been kind of predictable. And it's still kind of, it can be kind of scary to be on this path of what we say uncertainty. And I know for many people, having a career, it's certain, it's a an opportunity for certainty. And it's something that we desire because we need it in so many ways practically. And, I'm definitely not in an illusion that I could kind of live in this way forever. But there are a lot of people in the world who increasingly also, freelancers or people who have this what they call portfolio career, that they do different things, and it's not the most certain of paths to walk, but there's a huge benefit to doing what you feel you really, it's aligned with your sense of purpose and a mission in life. There's really nothing like it. Like, you find that you can tolerate a lot of other things for the sake of doing something that you really care about.
There's some percentage of that I read the other day. It was like people who don't like their job and would just like fantasize about quitting. It was like some huge amount,
like 98% or something.
No, it wasn't that much, but it was something like over 50%.
Wow.
Like over 50% go to their, are in their jobs, or they're just thinking like dreading going to work, or dreading, or just like dreading their boss, and they want to leave and they want to change careers, or they want to do something drastic. Like, that's there's something messed up with our society
It's
that it's
terrible.
like that. Like,
It's terrible.
but again, we have to be practical as well. Like, people have to maintain themselves and stuff. But sometimes I feel like, as believers of God and having faith in God, that that if you do something, if you follow your heart and you follow what your duty is, then that He will help you kind of get into a place that it's comfortable for you and that's inspiring, but also to find inspiration not just in work but also in your own spirituality outside of work. Right. So
I want to say something.
Sure.
An interesting point that I heard about that. I was listening to a class the other day, and this point was raised that from a spiritual perspective, your maintenance doesn't come from your income. And I found that to be such a nice, succinct way of expressing it. My maintenance does not come from my income.
Wow.
If we all deeply understood that and had faith in that, what a different place the world would be.
Yeah.
Because when I think that by this, and this, I get X amount of money, therefore I can live a certain life, then you're really bound to do whatever it is that you're doing that's giving that income. And I'm definitely not kind of passing judgment on people that live in that way, because it's completely understandable. The world is a very harsh place, and particularly in America, where you see that it's not as much as in Europe that the government kind of protects people that aren't so well financially situated. Particularly in America, it seems like you got to be on the ball. Otherwise you can very quickly be ground into the dust. But I really I like to think about this a lot, because I think it's a revolutionary idea in today's world. And if more of us kind of think about it and talk about it, even if we're not fully able to be in that place, even if it's a transitional space or we have to still work jobs, but getting into that consciousness that my maintenance doesn't come from my income. That the wealth that is due to me by past actions and by, divine grace is going to come to me regardless of what I do. Not that means you're complacent, but it's definitely it's predetermined to a certain extent. So what was it like, just going back, I understand, that when you grow up as a Hare Krishna, there has to be, even from my own experience, that you have to choose at some point to be a Hare Krishna devotee. It's not that you just grow up in it and then it's just like automatic. Of course, there's like some type of choice of that you have to make to accept your faith and to really embrace it and stuff. So, when was it for you where you, or you did not, maybe you didn't have that, but where was it for you where you kind of embraced it more than it was just something that your parents did? Yeah, it's a question that I get asked quite a bit, because I think people see someone like me and that that I'm kind of in quite a public way, like, trying to also share spiritual teachings, and so they're like, what did your parents do? Raising you, and my parents are always like, I definitely had that very normal trajectory of like questioning things. I never really rejected it fully, but it was more passive, like, I do this because my parents do, and that's just what we do in our community. But there was definitely a point when I was kind of 17, 18. I'd already gone off the beaten track in my education choices. I'd had a really rough experience of trying to go to public school, and hating it like so much that I kind of made myself sick, because it was just like, I just hated it so much. I felt like it was really difficult for me to feel that I could be myself, because we'd been kind of cultivated in a certain soil, you could say, and use it like a kind of garden analogy. We'd grown up in a certain soil and then being like transplanted into something completely different. It was like a huge culture shock. And the effect that it had on me was that I just became completely withdrawn. I became like a blank sheet of paper. I didn't know how to speak about, you know, who I was or what my beliefs were. And I found that kids were very, very ignorant of other faiths and, you know, traditions. Like, I went to like a pretty good school, but it was very Christian and Jewish and quite wealthy kids. So by the time I made it through that long dark tunnel of like school and teenage years, I was really, I'd like chosen to do part of my education by evening classes. I was working on my own and all this stuff. And so I felt like I was far off the beaten track. And so I guess it was a natural thing at a certain point that I had that independence to start thinking, well, okay, now what do I think about my spiritual life? So I remember when I was 18, I started listening to some lectures, which, you know, when you're growing up, that was like really not the cool thing to do. Like, in the morning when the lecture would begin, if we were at the temple, like all the young people would leave, and
of course,
you know, we wouldn't do anything like kind of like that would show you had enthusiasm for. So I started listening to lectures of His Holiness Sachinandan Swami, and I hadn't really heard from him much before. It really touched me. It really awakened like a genuine interest. And so I started downloading them. It was like my private little thing. I would like, as I would walk around, I had my first iPod and I would listen to them. And I started to chant japa on the mala, japa mala, which also was another thing that was like, you don't want to do it. If your parents ask you to do it.
Well, like from like the other, like your peers?
Or from your peers, yeah. Those things were not cool at all.
Interesting.
And also I knew, like, you know, my dad was always keen to see that we were doing that kind of thing. Of course. And then, of course, your parents make a huge deal about it if you do it. So I didn't want to do it.
Dad!
Yeah. Stop it! I'm not going to do it now just because you said that.
Right.
But I started chanting, and I was kind of like, I wanted to chant. I started thinking like, yeah, my parents have been doing this for a really long time, so maybe, you know, there's really something in it. I wanted to chant every day, but then I would chant one round every day, and then I would stop, and then I would chant two, and then I would stop, and I just kind of felt like, yeah, I'm never going to really manage to do this. But the seed was planted, and I started doing those things much more of my own accord, and going for a walk and chanting japa and things like that. And I think something just woke up in me, this kind of curiosity and interest. And a huge two factors were really big. One was these bus trips. It gave me a taste for service, actually, service in the spirit of devotion, and with peers, which I hadn't really, at least as a young adult, I hadn't really kind of tasted it. And being at festivals and all these things, but really being part of it, really being needed as one of the team, which I grew up in such a large community that I think, as it is naturally in big places, you know, not everyone feels needed because there's simply not. You know, there's enough people to do everything, and young people often get that kind of, you know, they're just kind of there. You know? Right. So that was a huge thing for me. And then the second thing was an encounter I had meeting someone who many people have heard of, Yamuna Devi. Right. Who was, you know, one of the first disciples of Srila Prabhupada, and her companion, who she was living with, Dina Tarine Devi Dasi. The two of them together, meeting them in 2005 when I was 18. It was only like a kind of like a 24-hour thing. We stayed with them in the Sharanagati Valley in British Columbia, where they lived. But the experience was, they're such incredible personalities, really. You know, even leaving aside the devotional aspect of who they are, which you can't really, because that's really who they are. But, you know, just as people, as accomplished, you know, people, they're incredible people. But in terms of their devotional, spiritual life, they've they were practicing with such depth and such sincerity and heart, and my encounter with them left me feeling like, whoa. It's like a curtain got pulled back, and I was kind of like, wow, I want to experience that.
Amazing.
Like what they're practicing, what they're tasting, I want to taste that. And I remember we were driving away, and I said to my mom, like, it makes me feel like I want to be a devotee, you know. And
wow.
It was really,
you were really affected by their association.
It really affected me.
Amazing.
Not only at the association, but the whole experience of the ambience of their home. Their home was built according to the principles, excuse me, of Vastu, which for people that don't know is kind of like the feng shui of India. And
it was built according to that.
According to Vastu, from scratch. It's a straw bale home, and the ground. The floor was all like beaten earth, and it had like a skylight, and everything, every little detail in that home was devotionally focused and with such aesthetic detail and taste, and it was just like this otherworldly experience where everything is revolving around Krishna basically, and I just felt like this is just it just was an experience unlike anything I'd ever had before.
Wow, amazing.
So I just felt like I was kind of charged after that, and I continue to try and seek out their company, which proved to be something really character forming in my life and shaped my life, I would say.
Right.
At a young age.
So she was one of the most you could say prominent lady disciples of Srila Prabhupada, the society's main who started ISKCON.
Definitely who was publicly visible and very much at the forefront. Right.
I feel like there's a good segue into what I wanted to ask you about kind of like women's roles and women in Krishna consciousness. So do you ever, there's always $1
million question.
Right, yeah. There's always, how do I word this? There's kind of this, you could say, conception that maybe that women are, meant to feel inferior, or some of the things that Prabhupada might have written in the Bhagavad Gita. I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday about the first chapter. Yeah. There's something written there. So in your experience growing up as a Hare Krishna, did you ever feel that a sense of that people, that men were kind of seen as more superior, or that women were seen inferior, or that you had to not do certain things because you were a woman or something? Like, just give us your experience with that. I think that's something interesting people would like to hear about. Also because you're so prominent lady in Hare Krishna, the Hare Krishna movement. You're like you're like kind of like the face, of you inspire women.
The face of the women's suffragette movement.
You're like inspiring for
face of women's empowerment.
Yeah. You could say that. You inspire women because you're very much on the you're there visible. Exactly. You're visible to everyone. Yeah. So your experience regarding that would be really cool to hear.
Yeah. Well, definitely. It's a big topic, and it's one that gets like dangled in front of me all the time. Whenever I get asked to do anything, people are like, yeah, we really want you to do it because like it will inspire the women. And I start to feel like doesn't anything else inspire the women? But yeah, so growing up, one thing is that when you grow up in a certain cultural bubble, there's some things you just might not question because you don't see how it is for other people. So I think it's not necessarily that I saw women disempowered, or at least I didn't view it like that, because there wasn't that narrative that was being kind of told to me. Certainly I didn't see women, leading kirtan much.
Really?
I didn't really see women giving class.
Wow.
Pretty much almost never, I would say.
Well, growing up?
Growing up.
Wow.
Yeah. I saw women empowered in certain roles, for sure. maybe what would be considered traditional, you know, not necessarily as speakers, but as people who were preaching, to use a traditional term, preaching, you know, organizing, managing, things like cooking, you know, cooking huge quantities for feasts for thousands of people, or things like that. I saw women doing those things. And I definitely had a lot of women in my life who were, I mean, all of my teachers in school were women and who were very strong characters and empowered in their own way, for sure. But there were definitely things which women just didn't do. And I never really thought about it because that's just how it was. And then when I got to a certain age, I think I did start wondering, you know, why don't women like lead the Kirtan in the morning program? Or why don't women give Bhagavatam class? And I think, you know, in some places or some context, maybe that was more consciously done. But I think very often a culture just evolves in a certain way because of misunderstanding or not empowering people to do something that they're very capable to do. And then that becomes almost like calcified into a culture that everyone just accepts, well, this is just why. This is just because this is just how things are. You know, there's no reason why a woman shouldn't be giving Bhagavatam class. But as my mom explained, very often they just weren't encouraged to do it in her generation. So then by the time you get to kind of my generation, it's kind of just an accepted thing, like, no one thinks, you know, oh yeah, they're women, like maybe they're too shy or they don't like to do such things, you know?
Right.
And they're like, well, it's not that we don't like to do it. No one ever asks us, you know?
Right.
So I see that there's a lot of that. Like certainly there have been people who really take this statement out of context that, you know, the classic women are less intelligent, which personally doesn't bother me. Those type of statements don't bother me because I've always, first of all, not seen that to be the case in the way that people paint it out to be, you know, that women are just really dumb. But they have a different type of intelligence often. And also, for me, I see that, you know, in this age that we live in now, gender roles and even the gender psychology are very mixed up. There's not these stereotypical kind of things that you might have been able to define much more clearly. So anyway, that's just a side note. But what I was saying was that I see that it's not often so intentional, though there have been many instances where it is, but it's just that a culture evolves in that way. So I'm really happy that now, you asked me about my experience, that was my experience in the past. That if somebody would have asked me to do certain things, I would have been like, well, I don't know, because like women don't really do this, you know?
Right.
Like when people ask me to give a lecture, like the traditional temple lecture, I feel a bit like, you know, because I just don't see many women doing it. And sometimes I don't want to be the flag bearer, you know, I don't want to be like the person at the front, like, hey guys, we can all do it, you know?
Interesting, because you're so much that person, whether you like it or not.
Yeah,
right?
by default maybe, just because I just happen to be doing those things. And a lot of that is because of, you know, the people that I have grown up with. My elders are very strong women and men, and they've given me so much love and encouragement that I have enough self-confidence to stand in roles where, you know, like for instance, there's these big Kirtan festivals, and, you know, once I got this feedback that someone was criticizing that, oh, Jahnavi's, you know, terrible role model for girls because she's sitting in the middle amongst all these men and they're all looking at her, and, you know, she doesn't have her head covered. And this was in India,
right.
You know, but they were saying like the girls shouldn't look to her to be a role model.
Wow.
And when I heard that, it really, because I always feel that if you ever hear someone talk something about yourself, you should accept at least part of it to be true, because you should take it as an opportunity to learn. Right. So when I heard that, initially I was like, I don't want to do those things anymore. I don't want to be in those places. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, you know? But then I just realized, well, whatever. It's just, you know, maybe people don't understand the thinking of why I'm doing that. So yeah, by some way or another, people see me as that or put me up to that.
Right.
But sometimes I don't want to. I'm quite a shy person in one way, and it sometimes feels quite awkward to like be put in that space. But I'm really happy that more and more people are aware of it, and people are just encouraging girls within the Hare Krishna world to feel fully empowered to perform all different kinds of roles and functions. Because certainly it's kind of a weird thing. Like I say to people sometimes, I feel more aware of being a woman when I walk into a Hare Krishna temple than I do walking down the street in New York City.
Right, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's just like that.
Yeah.
The way society is today, it's a lot more free in a certain way.
Right.
So,
Going back to like how you were saying how you're kind of like the face of of ISKCON women. I kind of just made that up on the spot, actually.
now it's going to get quoted. Namarasa.
But how do you deal with all the, you could say, fame or kind of the exposure that you have to like so many people, like whether it be social media or even in person, people asking you to come different places and stuff. You seem like you're not affected so much by that. I mean, I know you quite closely, so I can tell you that you're not affected by it. I feel like maybe inside you are, but I don't know. From what I see, it's like you're not. You take it really gracefully. I feel. So what things do you? Maybe what I'm trying to say is like, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with all the exposure that you have?
Well, it's a weird thing. It's kind of like, I think if I had, somebody once said to me, and again, this is one of these things that when someone says something, even if you immediately like, that's not true, then when I reflect on it, I'm like, let me take it's
kind of true, maybe. Yeah.
So somebody once said to me, and it was someone that was close, they were like, you're experiencing all this fame, like you wouldn't get that if you hadn't been desiring it in some way. So you must have really wanted it.
Whoa.
And initially I was like, that is not true at all. I definitely didn't want it. I hate it sometimes.
Right.
And then I started thinking, and I was like, actually, yeah, deep down, maybe I do, maybe because we all get quite attracted to being seen, to being appreciated and, praised and all of these things. Even if I don't consciously want it now, I'm sure that in a deep space in my heart, I'm very happy about, being glorified in whatever way.
Right.
But I can say that on a kind of level more of the spiritual intelligence, which I try to cultivate, by hearing and reading and talking with those who are much more advanced than me. I understand that fame is something which is, it's just ridiculous, really, what it is and the experience of it. Mm-hmm. Particularly someone that really helped me with this was Yamuna Devi, because I think she saw, whether she was someone that could see what could happen in the future or she just had a deep intuition. Somehow she seemed to know that I would be experiencing this more and more in my life, because she passed away about, I think it's 6 years ago now or 7 years ago. And much of my interaction with her was when I was kind of, 18, 19, really till I was maybe like 25 or something. So, but even from the beginning, like as she saw me being kind of pushed forward to do things, she would really, really warn me and actually engage me in a lot of discussion and reflection on it. Many times she used to pull out this book called Amrita Vani. It's instructions of Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur in a conversational format. Wow. And we would read it together, and she would particularly focus on this pratishta, fame section, and then we would discuss it. And she kind of like drilled it in a very loving way, that you have to be extremely careful about it, and sharing even her experience. She said to me one time that it really went in deep. She said, fame and infamy are just two sides of the same coin. So actually, one is glorification, the other is just people talking about you. both are people talking about you.
Yeah.
You know, and the experience ultimately is just that. Like that's kind of all it's good for. Yes, you can use it for something, but it's definitely not something to treasure, because you can feel so strongly how the ego responds. You know, it just inflates when someone starts to, you know, praise you, and until you start to develop a mental discipline of actually handing it on. So I think when I was a lot younger, I didn't realize what was coming ahead, but I was getting kind of trained for that, you know, to try and just bypass it, you know, like when you have a, you know, a spiritual teacher, a guru, you just kind of take whatever praise comes your way, and you can envision it like a flower. You just put it at their feet. And I tried to do that. But at the same time, it is something quite strange many times, because normally, unless you're talking about people in the media, like celebrities, I mean, these days you can become famous for doing anything. You can become a YouTube star just for, you know, sneezing in a funny way or whatever it might be. So that's the way the world is. But taking the Hare Krishna world as a microcosm of the bigger world,
right?
You know, when you have things like the internet and social media, YouTube, you can become a Hare Krishna celebrity very easily now. You know, you just
like the little kids who
sing something in a like
Haribo,
like a nice way with a video, and then suddenly, you know, everyone knows who you are, and you're getting invited to Kirtan Mela. And so fame, because it's such a small world in a sense, there's probably only 1 million people, I don't know how many, but
maybe less even.
Maybe less, who are Hare Krishna, who are practicing that Bhakti Yoga path, specifically Gaudiya Vaishnava. You can become really well known amongst that society. And so I guess I've been able to see the kind of silliness of that. And like, for instance, one year I went to Kirtan Mela, and literally almost from one year to the next, like I used to be able to go to pilgrimage places like Mayapur and Vrindavan, and of course I was completely anonymous. Like no one knew who I was. I was just some girl, you know, from England. And then suddenly it was like I went for the Kartik period, and there was all these people like mobbing me for my autograph like a lot. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. This is just weird. Why do you want this? And I said to these people, they were like, oh, like, ah. And I was like, why do you want my signature? Like,
because you're Namarasa's sister-in-law.
Yeah, I'm famous Mridanga player in Namaras. And or like in Mayapur, I remember I was there for the Kirtan festival, and people were like coming up to me with their children and wanting me to bless their children. And
really?
Paying obeisances to me, bowing down to me.
Whoa.
And it was really uncomfortable. And actually, after that year, I felt like, actually, I don't want to come here again. I don't want to be here in places where people are doing these things, because it's just it's weird.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and the other thing I was going to say about that is that usually amongst a spiritual society, you become famous for your spiritual advancement. But because of the way the world is going now, you can become famous for just like singing really nice or whatever it may be.
Yeah, yeah.
And that cheapens it as well, because you're
Definitely
not famous for something really worthy, which is having like great depth and spiritual kind of insight.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, she dresses so nicely. I know, I didn't mean to say that in an Indian accent, a fake Indian accent. But there's definitely a lot of people from India that watch YouTube. And,
of course,
you know,
yeah, it's part of the new culture.
Part of the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. I was also wanted to talk to you about you were saying about kirtan. So you know you're very obviously very influential. You do kirtan and you're very good at it, and you're very musically inclined as well.
Oh, thanks, Nam.
But I'd like to know, I think also like maybe some things that you don't like about being in the forefront of the kirtan scene as well, or what, like you were saying, how, spiritual advancement, and as well as you could just be, you could just be musically very inclined.
Yeah.
But those two things are kind of jumbled up and made into one. That you're getting flown all over the world. Like you could be Joe Schmo, but you're just like a sick kirtan leader. But you just get flown over and you do all kinds of nonsense, blah blah blah. So I know there's a whole people argue about this endlessly on Facebook and debate about it. So
we should probably do a whole episode just about
this. We can do. What's our time looking like?
I don't know what's going on here.
Tilsy's manning the laptop. She doesn't know anything about it. That's the mouse. Yes.
50.
A 50? Okay. We can make it another episode. This could be just intro, but I'd like to kind of also just dive into that a little bit. So whatever I said previously.
Speak now. Again, like I think the kirtan scene is like a new thing, having an international kirtan scene. This is all things that are facilitated by the internet and international travel. To be able to have this kind of global network of kirtan leaders, and of course, maybe it would, if you didn't have those things, it could happen on a much smaller scale, a local level, and it might come about in a similar way. But the internet and international, easy flight travel, it amplifies it. With the increase in popularity of kirtan, both within the Hare Krishna community and in the mainstream kind of yoga and well-being culture, it becomes a thing. I know I was talking to one disciple of Srila Prabhupada the other day, and he was like, now you have to be a singer, like to lead a kirtan. Like you have to be a good singer. Yeah. Otherwise no one cares. And I was trying to encourage him, and because he's such a wonderful devotee, and actually he does sing really well. Yeah.
But he's not the one he's not going to be asked first or anything.
He doesn't get asked.
Right.
No,
right.
And he's,
I find that problematic.
I have a problem with that too.
Yeah.
But it's complicated. It can be complicated, and the complexity is also that now there's kind of a desire of a lot of people to be the kirtan leader, to be seen. Like I was at this Sadhu Sangha festival in America some months back, and they have the kirtan leader, and then they have, because it's on a stage, which we can get into that as well another time. Right. They have
a stage.
They have what we call now, like it's like almost like a codified thing, the backup mics, the backup singers. Yeah. To kind of do the response vocals, which is another of my pet peeves. Sometimes.
What, singing into the mic as
backup mics, like as
I'm not into that either.
As a thing.
I'm just gonna agree with you on anything here.
There's a time and a place for it for sure, but I don't like it as a kind of like it always has to be there. Yeah. So people were coming up to me like, because I was also asked to be the MC flying the women's empowerment flag. Woo! People were coming up to me like, can I come and sing for the next kirtan? Like, can I be on the mic, sing in the mic? Yeah. And just random, anyone that was there. And I felt this this pressing urge. Like, I also want to be seen. I also want to be like live streamed on Mayapur TV and have everyone see me singing in a microphone. And so, it's a kind of an unusual, it's not unusual. It's not unusual. It's actually just it's human nature. There's a culture evolving, which is another space to see and be seen. Yeah. And it happens to be related to kirtan, which happens to be amongst Gaudiya Vaishnavas our number one activity that we know is, if there's one thing we're all going to agree on, it's we should be doing kirtan. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think that kirtan should be going on in every and any form, because I believe in the purity and the potency of the mantra. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that is kind of sullied or brought down by any number of different things which might be, not really best kirtan practice. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's to a huge degree, there needs to be more thoughtfulness to the way that the kirtan culture evolves from this point onwards, to our understanding of what is actually happening when a kirtan is being performed. And I use that word in the original sense, to perform something, to do something.
Right.
That it's not a performance, although there's also a space for that, devotional performance.
Yeah. You do that for like a completely new audience and people who don't know anything about it.
Yeah. And also for the purpose of devotional art, which is also, it's a very, very important aspect of culture.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we're kind of speaking about it generally. Were there specific things that you had in mind?
Also, I mean, see, when you said devotional art, it reminded me of someone had shared this. There's on each side of this, discussion, there's always like people who have different views. So the people always pull out the quotes, Prabhupada, like, why are you doing this road show? We are not interested in this road show. Just chant Hare Krishna at the temple. I don't know the quote, but it was basically like putting down or kind of cherry picking a quote of Prabhupada that says, don't travel around and do kirtan. Like, what was it say? Do you remember that quote?
Well, Srila Prabhupada, as far as I understand the story, Srila Prabhupada stopped the roadshow because certain things had become innovative to the point of being a bit wild.
Right.
And there was kind of very careless mixing of men and women, and other things were coming about. But before that, he was very encouraging of it, and he actually
there are other
liked
quotes
that they were doing it.
Yeah. So that, I guess my point is the cherry picking of quotes to kind of your own agenda of what side of the discussion or argument you're on.
Yeah, and there's going to be endless opinion about this kind of, for anything that has everyone's attention focused on it, and there's also the opportunity for people to see and be seen. There's going to become like, and also because we take seriously the spiritual purity of that activity, so
definitely.
Naturally there's going to be debate, and it's going to be quite heated oftentimes. Which I think is good, because that means there's life there. When you discuss things, it means we care about it, and we're trying to get to the bottom of what is the best way to do this. I mean, an interesting quote I want to just mention is from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He said that, I'm still trying to find out where this quote comes from, because it was shared with me by a senior devotee, but that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that the playing of instruments and singing, he used this word toriatrike, that it can be the ultimate vice, but when engaged in the right way, it can be the highest form of worship.
Wow.
And I always find that an amazing kind of I can't think of the word, polarization of the two things, that they're so far from each other, the greatest vice or the highest form of worship.
Yeah.
So why is that? And
that's such
is really important.
That line to keep things pure and really spiritually strong, but at the same time having good exposure and what am I trying to say? I forgot my train of thought.
The line is a fine one to navigate?
Yeah, because like in your example, like you have a very strong spiritual practice as well as being very strong in kirtan and doing kirtan. So those two things are go hand in hand, I think, for someone. I lost my train of thought again. And what were we talking about before that?
I was saying that it's really important, to have like debate. Well, that
debate, right.
Yeah, that these two things, the greatest vice or the highest form of worship. That's really true, that it can be, both things. Also, I wanted to ask you about, one of the main debates I remember a number of years ago was like kirtan for money. Mm-hmm. So, there was the side of, that's saying, okay, we want to do kirtan, we want to maintain ourselves, and if we can't do kirtan, then we have to get jobs, and then we can't do as much kirtan as we want to. Yeah. And then this other side is like, no, it doesn't matter,
get a job, but then do kirtan purely without,
Yeah.
you know, for money and stuff.
Yeah.
So what was your kind of, I'm sure you were doing kirtan a lot during that period of time, traveling and whatnot. So yeah, like tell us a bit about that. Like, where were you during that whole discussion? Yeah.
I mean, for me, like in one sense, I was young enough to not be like heavily concerned about bills to pay and stuff like that. So I would do these programs as a part of a group, and we would get given a donation, and I would accept whatever I was given. I often had no idea. I mean, I'm not the most financially switched on person anyway.
Right.
But I often had no idea like what the amount was, and I would just put it all together, and I never was calculating anything. So in one sense, for me, I felt like I was a little bit padded from that situation where someone does, you know, maybe have a family and they're having to provide for their children and their wife, and they're really in anxiety about how to do that as well as perform this service that might not happen if I don't do it.
Right.
So, but I mean, firstly, what always kind of peeves me about this debate is that often the people that are criticizing are not really being confronted with this thing of how to, you know, kind of perform that type of service as well as maintain some kind of livelihood. Many times, at least in my experience, I heard the criticism coming from very young people, often boys, who were kind of just like, well, I'm doing something which is right. I'm going to be in an ashram and I'm just going to chant.
Oh, right,
you know,
yeah.
that kind of, I'm not going to, you know, get into specifics, but
right.
that often a lot of criticism was coming from that direction.
Right.
And I firstly, I just don't like that type of mentality. I mean, I'm definitely a critical person also, in the sense that I do look at things critically, and I have a tendency to find fault with things and how this could be better. But I think that if we have that propensity, we have to use it in a positive way. You know, first of all, start with yourself. First of all, examine your own heart and your own motives for what you do. And really that's the most important place to be focusing anyway in terms of spiritual practice. Because it's not your business to be, generally, it's not your business to be correcting what somebody else does.
Such a good point.
But on that point of kirtan and money, I think bhakti yoga is a spiritual path that is, there's subtlety to it, you know. It's not all black and white. It's a path that is based on the heart. Mm-hmm. And it's so much about your consciousness and your intention. So Definitely. What is right for one person is not going to be right for another person. You know, if someone is a sadhaka, a strong spiritual practitioner, and they're doing a certain activity which is impacting hundreds of thousands of people, but they need to maintain a living and they need to, you know, bring a certain amount of money, then they're going to have a different type of consciousness than someone that's like, oh, I really want to be famous and I couldn't make it in the real music world. So the kirtan world looks pretty easygoing, you know. Yeah. Let me just get out on the road and I'll be famous. But even if that is their mentality, do I need to judge that? Or is there a higher power than me who is seeing everything, who has eyes everywhere, who's going to see and who's going to give an opportunity for that person to correct their mentality? And surely that's going to happen anyway. You know, I think there's often this kind of like overinflated sense of responsibility in everyone, that we've got to like make things, kind of fix everything. You know,
I definitely am guilty of that.
Because I'm the one who has, you know, the greatest understanding of how things should be.
Yeah.
But if we are practitioners of this particular, you know, tradition, or any spiritual tradition, you know, we believe that God is omniscient and is within and without and is seeing everything and has, you know, an unfathomable depth of love for every living being, then why would he not want us to be corrected in the way that we're, you know, he would want us to be transformed and reformed. So everyone is going to go on that road in a different way. Mm-hmm. But it is certain people's position to do that correction, and those are, you know, gurus and people who are leaders. So
Yeah.
but at least personally, my feeling about it is still evolving, because for me personally, for Kirtan, I've never like said you need to give me a certain amount for doing something.
Right.
I always say like I need to cover the expense of coming somewhere. But otherwise I just accept whatever a donation is. But I don't have, dependence in my life, and if I did, I might, if it came to it, I might actually. I grapple with this a lot, because a lot of people tell me now at this point, okay, you've got to be more financially stable, and so sometimes I feel like, well, I'd rather not do that type of activity if I have to attach, a monetary, like specific monetary need to it. I'd rather keep the two things separate for me personally. But at the same time, I can see that that's not always the best. That's not always serving best, because it's true that coming back to what we were talking about before, that a lot of people are bound in careers and jobs where they really have almost no time to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there's an urgent need in the world for, spiritual sound vibration, for uplifting philosophy to be shared. So if certain people are going to kind of take the risk of putting themselves out there to do that, then maybe it can be even up to the broader community to try and help to financially support them.
Yeah,
this is something I've been talking about with certain friends who are much more in that difficult position than I am. They're wondering, what about the patronage of the broader, Hare Krishna community to support people who are putting their life on the line, really, to do it, because it's...
That's a whole discussion.
It's a whole big discussion, and I'm sure you might have other guests on who might talk about that more.
Definitely. So let's wrap it up here. I think we're coming up to the end. I just wanted to ask you a few questions. Tell us something about yourself that people may not know.
Is this a quick fire round?
Could be.
People might not know. Well, people often I find that people kind of paint me as this very pure devotee kind of, I don't know.
Hey, tell us, you want to tell that funny story?
She picks her nose.
No, but I think people maybe aren't aware of how much I'm kind of aware of popular culture and engage with it. So maybe something they don't know about me is that I kind of am very musically absorbent, and I pick up a lot of different music or popular culture, art, film, these different things.
Right.
So people often get shocked when I quote songs, or they're like, how do you know about that?
How do you know that song by the Notorious B.I.G.?
Or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I know.
You're a big rap fan, I heard. Hip hop? No, she's really not.
No, I'm really not. But I can sing a lot of Disney songs, which is a bit embarrassing.
You probably shouldn't have said that.
I was with Jai Jagannath, who you had on before.
Yeah.
And we were on our way back from an event, and we were talking about this because he was really shocked that we were talking about some music. Oh yeah, little Gaurachandra Tulsi sent a video of him playing, and I said, oh, that's the it's like an overture from the music for Romeo and Juliet, which is a ballet, a very old ballet. And he was like, oh, and Vera was like, no, I thought it was the that's the Star Wars theme tune, no? And I was like, no, Star Wars is da da da, and I started singing the tune, and they were like, whoa, how do you know that? And then he was like, no, but what about Harry Potter? And then I was singing the Harry Potter theme tune. They were like, whoa! And then on the way back, Jai Jagannath and we were singing the song from the Disney film Pocahontas. And anyway, we were both surprised. I was surprised that he knew all the words, and he was surprised that I knew all the words.
Probably shouldn't admit all that. Anyways, okay.
Next question.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Oh my God. Well, the other day, there's a wonderful person at the Bhakti Center who's a yoga teacher, Jai, and he did this meditation with us in a yoga class of going back for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And I was kind of like, oh my God, I realized I've been doing the same thing for quite a long time now. Like I haven't really changed even my aspirations and things. They haven't changed that much, which you could either see as a bad thing or a good thing. But I think I wouldn't mind if I was, you know, more or less doing the same thing but better, and maybe, you know, more evolved in all the things that I'm trying to practice to do. But maybe with a family or something, children, maybe.
Okay, that's
Maybe.
good. Yeah, very nice. What's your biggest pet peeve? In
Oh my
Kirtan,
God, I
in
think-
Kirtan, and also outside of Kirtan. Since
I think
you're
I'm compiling a list of pet peeves recently. Not for this, but I think it kind of crossed my mind that maybe I should share it on the internet. So.
Sounds very pessimistic.
I do have a lot of pet peeves. I'll share a few with you.
Sure.
One is people clipping their nails on public transport.
Oh yeah, I
I've
hate
noticed that a lot. You hear the distinctive sound, and then you look around and somebody's just like clipping them onto the floor. I hate stuff like that. Or people leaving their hair in places. Like I really don't like that. There's some kind of temple related ones that are pet peeves that I'm happy to speak about, because I think it's kind of a thing.
Sure.
In the temple room, like when there's the altar and the curtains are open, it's a pet peeve for me when people are like talking in front of the altar or in the temple room about just any random stuff.
Yeah.
Without really an awareness that this is Radha and Krishna here, and you know,
Definitely.
this is their room. You know, we're here in their presence.
Yeah.
It really, really bugs me.
Or if they talk in front of the deities about the deities, like maybe they should put the flower there instead of there.
I don't mind that as much, because at least they're thinking about them. But
Right.
like, hey, so how you been doing?
Yeah.
Like,
Disrupt your darshan taking.
it's not even about that. It's just I just find it's like really unaware, and it kind of bugs me. And,
Yeah.
or when they start talking to you like that,
Oh,
making you
yeah,
feel like
yeah.
you've got to engage in that conversation.
Yeah.
And the same goes for kirtan, when the kirtan ends and then suddenly it's just like blah, 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 blah. Like generally I think, and I can speak for myself too, I know when you're annoyed by something, it's usually because that thing is in yourself.
Of course, of course.
So
Although I don't chant japa in Kirtan. And I hate that. I hate that
That's
so
another pet
much.
peeve. But
Oh my god, in class, and I can hear them chanting.
oh my god, that's really annoying.
That's why I made that really famous meme.
One time a senior devotee was chanting japa in class, but sitting right next to me. And I really didn't know what to do, because I didn't want to correct them, but I was really trying to hear the class, and it was Shivaram Swami giving class.
Yeah.
And there was like, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And I was just like very dramatically blocking one ear, so they didn't realize. But I was gonna say, generally, like, our tongues flap a lot, you know.
Right.
We speak a lot of unnecessary things, and that's kind of a bit of a pet peeve. But what to do, you know? We're all trying our best. I
Right.
hope.
Okay, last quick fire question by Tulsi.
Oh, I don't know.
That's not what I
That's
want
not
you to
very
say.
nice.
Prepared. You should have warned me.
Anyways, I think that's the end. Okay.
Anyway,
Thank you,
we ran out of
Jahnavi.
things to say bye.
Thank you for coming on the show. We'll have you on again, recurring guest, because I appreciate your angles on things. And
I'll check my diary and see if I have space for you. I'm
Okay.
pretty famous now, so I don't know.
So just my viewers, thank you so much for tuning on, and we're gonna have more guests coming on more frequently now that we got this studio space.
I want to say something now.
Okay.
Can I glorify? I'm going to glorify Namarasa, because
I think we don't have any much.
No. We have time. We have time. Please stop. Continue. Please continue.
I think because I really love this podcast, and I think it's really great, and I think
Thank you.
that you're, to this point that we were speaking about earlier, knowing you well, I know that, and I hope no one from your job is watching this podcast.
No, they probably wouldn't.
I know that your job is, your career is not something that, fills you with excitement every day, but
Yeah.
you're doing it very dutifully. But you really have like things that you really are excited by and you love to do, and you try and give your time to those things. So I think you're a really good example of trying to have your feet in those two different worlds, of
Right.
doing your duty, but really doing something really creative and exciting. And you know, your cartoons are your comics are another example of that.
Thank you.
People get so inspired and laugh so much from seeing them.
Yeah.
So I want to just like, you know, applaud you for doing that and setting an
Thanks.
example.
Appreciate it.
And remind everyone to kind of, you know, take encouragement from that there's real life in things that you are genuinely excited by. So,
Yeah, however simple they might be.
however simple. And you see how so many people are inspired by you doing this.
Yeah.
Even me. I want to start my own rival podcast now. Bye.
No, please don't. Then no one's going to watch mine.
Bye.
Start right now.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Of course.